DR, Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Application and Dr.SUJIYA.S College of Arts and Science. Today in Series 4, I am going to discuss about the deadlock avoidance solutions in operating system. The deadlock avoidance solution is being solved by two different algorithms, that is resource allocation graph and Banker's algorithm. Resource allocation graph is represented by a state of a system in the form of a graph, and a graph contains all the processes and resources which are allocated to them, and also the requesting resources of every process. Sometimes if the number of processes is less, we can easily identify deadlock in the systems just by observing the graph, which cannot be done easily by using tables that are used in the Banker's algorithm. So these are types of vertices. One is the process vertex and next is the resource vertex. So resource vertex is further divided into single instances and multiple instances. Resource allocation graph is a process vertex represented by a circle and a resource vertex represented by a box. The instance of the resource is represented by a dot inside the box. So this instance can be single or multiple instances of the resources. An example is a resource allocation graph, which is shown in the diagram here. Resource 1 is holded by process 1 is holding resource 1 and process 2 is holding resource 2, but resource 1 is waiting for the resource which is held by process 2, and process 1 is waiting for resource 2 which is held by process 2. And here P3 is holding resource 2, which is there is no other holdings of resource 3, where resource 2 can complete its tasks peacefully because it does not require any other task to complete it work. So this is how a resource allocation graph for multiple instances is being depicted to proceed further without a deadlock. Banker's algorithm does the same, where we explain the deadlock avoidance with the help of an example, and this algorithm predetermines whether the system will be in a safe state or not by stimulating the allocations of resources to the process according to the maximum available resources. It makes an state check before allocating the resources to the process. When there are more number of processes and many resources, then the Banker's is useful. But resource allocation graph is only used when it is of single vertex process, where Banker's algorithm is implemented for multiple processes. Banker's algorithm in operating system is a safe stimulating algorithm for allocating predefined maximum possible amount of all resources, then makes a state check to test for the possible activities before deciding whether the allocation should be allowed to continue or not. In simple terms, it checks if allocation of any resources will lead to deadlock or not, or if it is in safe state to allocate a resources to process, and if not, then the resources is not allocated to the process. Determining a safe sequence will assure that the systems will not go into a deadlock state. How does a Banker's algorithm actually works is by maintaining a matrix of resources and processes. Each row represents a process and each column represents a resource, and a matrix containing information about the current state of the system, including the maximum number of resources each process needs and the number of resources currently allocated to each process and the number of resources available in the system. What is the purpose of the Banker's algorithm is to prevent a deadlock, a situation where two or more processes are blocked, waiting for each other to relieve the resources that needs in order to proceed. Deadlock can cause a system to become unresponsive and may require people to recover. So the data structure used here is the available vector, maximum matrix, allocation matrix, need matrix. Here the total resources is 10, 5 and 7. Process P1, P2, P3 allocation graph, and the maximum required resources is being mentioned here. So the output of the save state after the process of all the task is, once P2 is executed, P4 will be executed, and P1 and P3 based on the release of the resources, and next P2 process will complete it, then P4, then P3 and P1, and then P4, P2, P1, P3 and P4, P2, P3, P1. Finally, there will be totally 4 save sequences will occur for completing a process for 4 processes with available resources of 3. And this is how Banker's algorithm works based on the maximum requirement of resources. So this is what has been explained here, which I have been explained in the previous slide. So deadlock avoidance is used by the operating system to avoid a deadlock by using resource allocation graph or by Banker's algorithm. So here the resource allocation graph can be applied only for a single process, where Banker's algorithm can be used for multiple